Shannon Knight. I'm a consultant. I've worked in the software industry for about 20 years now. I started out as a tech support specialist at a university, and from there I moved on to working as a QA engineer. That's a quality assurance engineer. Those are the people that test the software and make sure that it all works before it's released to the public. One of the things that I tell kids is that, you want to play video games all day? Become a QA engineer. You can play video games all day, you just got to break them. After being a QA engineer for a while, I've always been the person who gets things done and makes sure that everything's organized and everybody's kind of lining up and getting done what they need to get done so that projects can be finished. And I had a boss who recognized that in me and encouraged me to step into the role of a project manager. I started off with a pretty small project, and since then, that's been about 15 years ago now, since then I've managed everything from a project with a team of, 3 people, up to a project with 120 plus people. I handled everything from exhibition management to getting the piano refinished, to figuring out how we could move our website that had been built in the late 90s into a website that was actually in keeping with the, at least this century. Eventually my role morphed into handling all of the technology needs for the museum, working on getting Wi-Fi in all of the nooks and crannies of this old building that wasn't designed at any point for the technical world, making sure that we had the equipment needed to have meetings in the conference rooms. There weren't computers in the conference rooms. Working with the people at the museum to actually use the technology we had. When I first started there, everyone used paper calendars to schedule their meetings, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you think about it, you have 15 people that you need to meet with. All of them have their schedule on a piece of paper. You got to go around and meet with every single one of them to figure out what their schedule is, to figure out when you all can meet. One person throws a wrench in that, you got to go back. It took longer to schedule a meeting than it did to actually have the meeting. So one of my jobs was to gently encourage people to actually change. And that's been a big part of my role. Even though it's always been related to technology, technology is easy. Technology, there are no problems with technology, it's just a matter of figuring out how to make it work. The big challenge has always been, and I don't mean for this to sound negative, but the big challenge has always been people. And getting people on board and working to the best of their ability, regardless of what you're doing. People don't like to change. It's easier to stay where you are, even if you're not real happy there. It's easier to stay there than it is to try something new. And a big part of my role in every job as a consultant, as a project manager, even as a QA engineer, has been to try to work with people to make things, the best that we can possibly make them. Probably the biggest piece of advice I'd say is learn everything you can about the industry you're going into. When I've worked as a project manager, when I lead a team, regardless of what my job title is, I don't really care what the job title is. Whenever I lead a team, I make sure I know how to do every single job on that team. Now, I may not be great at it. In fact, I may be absolutely horrible at some of the jobs. But I make sure that the people I'm working with know that I've got their back, and that if they need help, I will step in them and help them as best I can. Pretty much, that's my biggest piece of advice is know everything, know how to do every job on your team, so that you can step in, and your team, more importantly, your team knows that you can and are willing to step in to help them, because you guys are all in that together.